Okay, so today I'm going to do another random mobile iPhone stream, and so that one took a little bit to start just because I tried to do that somewhat, like, okay, I tried to stream every day, so I try to get in the cutoff point of like, oh, it's like 11:59, so I just want to start, and then I knew I wouldn't be able to start for a few minutes, but there are some streamers who are really bad about that, though. Like Trainwreck's always used to be made fun of for that. Like, he would do these super long intros, like for hours, right before he would start. Or I guess my thing was I would go AFK a lot when I first came back. Right, in 2021, I would do it like that, where I would stream for long periods of time, and so the end result was still positive. Like, I was doing it for longer than I could ever do now, even, or any other point. Right, like 6 to 8 hours I would go. And sure, I'd be AFK in there here and there, but it wouldn't be like, it would still be a net positive, right? Would you rather be there for 8 hours, but you go AFK for 2 here and there, randomly, abruptly even? Or would you rather do like 2 hours uninterrupted, right? Like, it's still more that you're getting out of it. So let's look at one concept here that I discussed in my debate format of old, basically the lowest common denominator effect, or sort of the playing dumb effect, right? A lot of the time, there is this strange perception, and we get a lot of these new age labels and stuff to go along with it, the weaponization of medicine or, psychology, that is just totally bogus. The way that some of these terms and labels are used, it's just nonsensical. But specifically what I want to say is, it's just, because you got to think, oh, did these things not exist before? Right, like whatever label you want to use, modern, I won't even use them. Modern labels, right? Did cavemen suffer from that? Did, people hundreds of years ago suffer from that? And did it stop them from doing what they had to do? Like, it just doesn't make sense, right? It's totally made up bogus. What you're trying to do is you're trying to attribute everything, right? It's an attribution fallacy. So you say, oh, somebody's clean, they like to be clean, so therefore they're OCD. We're going to label it. Like, okay, but label doesn't matter. Like, okay, if you label me, you negate me. It's kind of like everybody could be labeled something. Everybody has idiosyncrasy. So you take anything anybody does and say, oh, let's label that as like, oh, they're defined by it, as if it's not something that anybody could just do, or a preference they could just have, or, even something they would stand by. Okay, they like to be clean, so what's wrong with that, right? It's not even necessarily a bad thing, but you get this label mentality. So the dumbing down aspect that I was talking about is the fact that, society and a collective mass of people expects you to kind of dumb down to a certain level, right? This sort of normative level. And so what happens is often what's considered negative is not so much that, oh, you're dumb, right? Or something, you come off a certain way, is that you don't dumb down enough, right? Like you're pretending or putting on the act. So here's the difference. If you dumb down to a certain collective level, that's good. Or no, it's a bad thing if you show awareness of it. So it's like both scenarios, you're acting the exact same way, right? You're dumbing down to a certain lowest common denominator. But in one situation, right, you would actually be that dumb, so that comes off as genuine. This is how society defines genuine, right? You actually are that dumb, or you actually are that surface level initial mind, and kind of, what you see is what you get. Your 5 senses you're limited to. You ignore the 6th sense of being able to think or have any other kind of awareness, and so you're dumbed down, and that's a genuine good person by society standards. Something bad would be projected like, oh, you show awareness of a process. The process and the action could be exactly the same, right? You also dumb down for the benefit of society, but now you show awareness of it or a little inhibition about doing it. Oh, now that's a bad thing. That means you're fake. That means you're, somehow, again, it'll project like, oh, you have some ulterior motive, or you have some other, nefarious thing. It could just be, again, you're dumbing down for the benefit of society, etc., but it doesn't mean that you want to, or that you vouch for it, or that you are happy about it, right? So those are the two scenarios, and what's telling about that is, again, the defining factor is the awareness of it, not the process. The process is exactly the same, right? You could act exactly the same way, but one of them, you're authentic, I guess, in the fact that you really are that dumb, without needing to dumb down, right? Or you've allowed yourself to be fully dumbed down, just period, right? It's kind of like what you see with younger, like maybe the borderline teenage years, right? You see people act in a way that is just like whatever they think people will respond positively towards, right? And they'll do it kind of like even at times where it doesn't make sense, or even at times where, right, they'll mold their whole personality like that. Like they'll act that same way around their parents as they do in school, right? They'll try to put on this, whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever they think people respond positively towards. So it sort of shows you that, again, you can reduce yourself fully to that, or you can still retain some self-awareness despite that, right? Because there's always like some pretense of a functional basis. Like, okay, it can be useful to do that. It can be useful to dumb down for a mass collective, although arguably not. And that comes to the problem of overextension. Like, well, it's just because there's so many people that you have to do that. So the more people there are, the more you have to dumb down, or the more you have to overextend everything. One of my favorite logical razors from my old format was everything mass-produced suffers in quality for it. So it could be education, could be anything. So again, even society, even human life itself, right? If you have this standard of just more people, right, now you kind of lower the standard of everything, even though you think technology kind of counters it. It's an interesting dynamic. Well, there's more people to make technology and run that would also try to counteract that. But there's just a minimalistic baseline that you don't need that, right? Like, oh, look, we have running water and we have all these, modern technology, but a lot of that you only need in the first place because there are so many people, right? If there were less people, all of that goes out the window because, the world is a big place with abundant resources. So it's kind of an inverse fallacy, right? Like, oh, you have all these modern luxuries, but you only need them in large part because of the sheer number of people that you have. If the world was a village of 100, this is a concept I always refer to, right? Then the world is your oyster. Everything is yours for the taking, kind of, it's just all there, right? There's no way 100 people could possibly, right, use or consume everything. So it's a self-created problem. That's why I always talk about the vouching of the state and the stimuli acme. Like, it's a big deal when people have kids. It's a big deal to do that. So make sure you vouch for the state that you're in, whatever that might be, right? It should be this perfect state that you vouch for instead of some conflict of contrivance that you perpetuate, right? It's kind of, it kills your credibility, right? That's the number one thing within my absolutist philosophy. Like, if you have children, you have zero credibility because it's one of two things. You either perpetuated a contrivance state that you didn't vouch for, right, that you have issue with, that you have conflict of contrivance with, that you are, flawed by your own standard within that, right? So you have no credibility there because you're perpetuating a conflict of contrivance that you don't vouch for. You're just a mindless, hedonistic animal who can't control themselves and has no standard and just mindlessly, randomly did it, which causes greater overextension and perpetuation of a process, again, that you didn't even vouch for yourself. Number two is if you do vouch for it, then you also have no credibility because that means you should be in a perfect utopian state. So you have no room to complain or bitch about it or, oh, look, I'm struggling to put food on the table for the kids, but you're the one who had them, then don't have them, right? You should be in a perfect utopian state if you vouch for it. Or, again, you use it as an excuse or overcompensation or false kind of value or meaning behind it, right, that you wouldn't need otherwise. Like, I wonder how it sounds from here. Like, now the phone is on my lap, so you probably can't even hardly hear me, but sometimes the iPhone mic is pretty good, but I think I have to talk quieter. I sometimes underestimate it. I always assume I have to talk louder because I'm driving and, like, right, that I'm driving, so I think I have to talk louder, but the reality is that it sort of makes it worse if you talk louder anyway. And then sometimes a Bluetooth headphone works as a mic too. The biggest problem with these type of sessions is people like to see your face for whatever reason, from my understanding of it, right? Like, this isn't good enough by itself. You need to show your face and appeal to cult of personality and maybe even a little to stimuli acme. Speaking of, like, you preserve something through that, against preserving stimuli acme, reproducing, whatever, having kids. So yeah, your credibility is shot because it should be a utopian perfect state, so don't complain about it or use it as an excuse, otherwise you shouldn't do it in the first place. Or if you do it, then again, either you don't vouch, which means you don't have any credibility, you shouldn't have done it, or you do vouch, in which case it should be perfect and you shouldn't use an excuse. So it shows you the really the low standard that people use for human life in that way. That it's just some expendable garbage to just be, well, you're just a hedonistic animal, so you can't help yourself, so just do it, and then use that as the basis of your, ego gratification to rationalize what would otherwise be an aimless, half-mass, zero-sum existence within a subversive, contrivance state, right? So it serves as a good overcompensation and placeholder, but again, it is the ultimate killer of credibility. That basically, I could show it in like very comical ways, almost like, oh, do you have kids? Then you have no credit. Like, you're in a debate, you're in this forum of people coming up on stage and discussing things or something. So, right, if you have children, you vouch for the state. So it also gives you credibility, the absolutist here. If you don't have kids and you don't intend to reproduce, or you hold it to a high standard of accountability, that gives you credibility, because you could say, this is one of the key tenets of absolutism, is this absolutist seeks finality, right? Whereas, you would have this half-mass, mindless mass in every era of human history, where you would just mindlessly go along with whatever's in front of you, reacting to it, things you didn't choose, but acting like they're absolute and perpetuating them, right? You go along with whatever. You're just a mindless sheep. So that is the mass of people. And so what that means is that basically you're in a position to, again, you're a mindless mass of people going along with whatever's in front of you. And the reason why that's relevant is because that means that you would do it no matter what, kind of. And you're just sort of, how exactly did I say it? Like, so the mindless mass will go along with anything versus, and has no real standards, right? They're just insisting upon things they didn't choose, or again, like a nearness postulate, ego basis. But there is a certain credibility to the absolutist here, whereby you basically are in a position to say, well, because we're not preserving that, we have credibility and we have a sense of finality. So for example, pretend, okay, that person is going to not have kids, and when they die, that's it. So in other words, they could be living their life in that sense, like with a sense of finality and accountability, instead of just, we're acting as if, there's a few phrases I use here, like, again, this half-mass, mindless mass would live as if they're going to live forever, right? And they sort of are they're going to reinforce and perpetuate whatever is in front of them, no matter what it is, right? With no standard, no objective criteria, nothing. Just whatever it is, what are the chances this mass of people, right, in every era always feels indignant and just sort of, right, goes along and perpetuates whatever's in front of them. So they'll do that uncritically, mindlessly, just treat it as an absolute. And so what that further goes to show is that when you preserve it, it's a situation where again, this mass would do it no matter what, with no standard, uncritically, non-choice reaction, insistence, egotism, right? All of this basis. So the problem with that is the fact that that's one of the things I realized, even as much as I, obviously have always psychologically analyzed people. I'm surprised to some extent at the level that the ego is used to control people and how much people don't realize it, right? Like, a lot of things aren't about intelligence or anything like that. The way that society really gets you is through the human ego. And so one of the key things here is the simple fact that, again, let me try to explain that again, because this is one that I haven't discussed maybe in some time, is the fact that, again, the absolutist has credibility within a sense of finality, because they didn't choose, right? You don't choose the state that you're in and what you're reacting to, etc., right? So they didn't choose to be born. They didn't choose their family. Nobody chooses those things. So now the credibility would come in from, okay, they're not perpetuating that state by having children. They're not vouching for it, so they could just end it with them, right? Like, okay. So, in other words, they're not at any point vouching for that state and saying, okay, I chose this, or I want this, or this is validated, or I'm going to perpetuate it and continue it on. Right, they're not doing that. Or they're saying they'll only reproduce if they're in a state that they do vouch for, that they do choose, that they do create, that it is sound, right, by whatever standard or measure they might have, is besides the point. Right, it would mean that it would have to be something they vouch for, instead of just mindlessly doing it and then reacting and saying, well, since we already have kids because we couldn't control ourselves, or since we're already in this state, let's just reinforce it. Right, that is not the way that an absolutist would work. So here, once again, you have the accountability, and that comes back to something here that, again, the credibility within a sense of finality, like, they're not going to have kids, or they don't have kids, right? So now they can look at everything like in a zero-sum sense. They're not trying to preserve a longevity process. They're not trying to reinforce and regurgitate contrivance standards. They're not trying to vouch for the state. So, like, let's say somebody does something, they live like sort of what seems like an extreme lifestyle, right, outside of the norms and conventions of society. You might condemn them and say, oh, that's bad, but really that shows you your own cognitive dissonance, that you're not at peace with your own state, and that it sort of reveals and invalidates your own kind of conflict of contrivance, because what happens is, like, they could just be free from that, and you say, oh, but that's not sustainable, basically. That's society's objection to it. Oh, that's not sustainable, but who says that they're trying to sustain it, right? Who says that they're adherent to the longevity process, that, oh, they're trying to live as long as possible? Is that the standard, that you're trying to live as long of a life as possible? But then why do people smoke? Why do people drink, right? They're half-mass hedonists. They sacrifice longevity process for pleasure or other, whatever it might be, right? Hedonistic elements. So the other point with that is the fact that you have the sense of finality as well, where contrivance and everything could end with them. They're not vouching for it. They didn't choose it. They're not perpetuating it. Right? So in other words, you could think like, oh, they could do whatever they want. But it's that framing is sort of, again, within contrivance too, as if they would need permission, as if a person needs permission to do whatever they want. No, they need a good reason and inhibition to not do something, which we're in such an overextended state that we don't think of it like that. Right? We would think we have to justify. This is like the false inherent contrivance response state, that we act like we have to justify what we do. Like, oh, you want to do this thing that you're capable of doing, right, from birth, and it's, one of the many infinite countless things that people can do, right, that are capable of doing. You have to justify doing that, not that you have to justify not that society would have to justify preventing you from doing it or inhibiting you from doing it. So you always use this fallacy of, well, some small number of people do bad things, so therefore we have to restrict everything for everyone. That's not a very sound process, because, right, as if you have to justify or get permission for every little thing you do, but that's the overextended state that you're in. And I'm surprised that people put up with it, but it's sort of a bread and circuses argument where, well, but you have this excess of technology or convenience, so you use that to kind of balance it out, even though the two have nothing to do with each other. That's why the absolutist is not sort of satisfied by that, because an unsound process is an unsound process. It doesn't matter if you have the bread and circuses of Rome versus earlier civilizations that would have had lesser technology, lesser overcompensation, the peasants working for heaven, right, promises of heaven. Oh, that wasn't good enough compared to the bread and circuses of Rome, which is a better overcompensation, versus what we have today with entertainment, escapism, conveniences of modern technology, right? All of those things don't matter. Is the process sound or isn't it? Not a matter of can we distract ourselves better from it, or can we overcompensate for it, right, with technology. That is not those are two separate things, right? Because by that logic, then, you can always just, if your technology is good enough, you just can't question anything, and it's just perfect and sound. But, so like China right now, it doesn't even have to be a government thing, but just, China right now, you can't question anything because, your technology there now is better than in previous generations, so therefore that justifies it, but it really doesn't. Right, those are two separate things, and the specific government or power structure of society at the time will try to take credit for that. It's all thanks to us that you have that technological state, etc., which is only somewhat true, because who's to say, right? You could theoretically have the same technology or similar technology in various other states, either whether it be system of government or culture or society, or even without society, or maybe you wouldn't need it then, right? The minimalistic mindset. So, but no, they try to take specific credit for it. Our exact establishment or power structure is responsible for the overall technological state that we're in and all the conveniences we have, even though that's not true, because you see in other parts of the world, they could be also advanced without, needing that exact state. So it doesn't vouch. It doesn't vouch for that particular state. And so, yeah, that's one significant concept of the absolutist philosophy of my own creation that I always talk about. That's one of the core tenets that I would use is, again, the sense of finality. So it's hard to tell somebody, think about how you would restrict them. Oh, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, or that's a bad thing to do. And then let's analyze, okay, why is it a bad thing to do? And it's only bad by a collective mass overextension, or by, again, a longevity process, or, again, reinforcing contrivance. So if that person doesn't value those things, right, see, because if you have children, it raises some accountability issue. Well, that means you vouch for it and you want to perpetuate it and this and that. If you don't do that, and again, the absolutist, let's say, isn't intending to do that, now there's a certain credibility that they can say, well, it doesn't matter because they can do whatever they want, because, again, as if they would have to justify it in the first place, because now they'll say, no, they don't vouch for the state. They won't perpetuate it unless they vouch for it, or until they vouch for it, or maybe never. And so now they're free to pursue that or do whatever they want or not do anything, because everything that you'd be saying would be only for, well, we have to do this. Why? For an overextended collective mass that they wouldn't vouch for in the first place, that they didn't choose, that they didn't, again, vouch for, that they didn't create. Right? So it's you can't lump in something with any accountability that, again, they didn't create it, they didn't choose it, they didn't vouch for it, they're not going to perpetuate it. The only thing maybe that happens that's hard to avoid, right, is that you're sort of forced into it, and then now you're given some sort of accountability or validation. That's where minimalism can be the best option, even though there are some fallacies here. Like, you would say, oh, why not just go live in the woods and be minimalistic? To some extent, you can try to do that. But because everything is monopolized to such a degree, right, you monopolize resources and means and everything. What happens is, if you try to do that, there'll be so many obstacles to it, right? You still, like, this is the ultimate takedown of contrivance that I use from a minimalist perspective, is where I said that basically, even to be free of contrivance or to not be part of a contrivance state, you would need the contrivance state's permission, right? So, like, to be free of society and just to not be a part of it, you still need its permission to do that. Right, so, you try to go live out in the woods and you hunt and you fend for yourself, but oh no, now you need a hunting permit, fishing permit, license. You have to follow all these other rules to do with that. You have to, right, so again, this is what rules and structure exist to really do, is to keep you in a half-mast state where nobody can ever truly, fully be free at any time in anything. Everything has to be restricted. Everything has to be deferential back to the contrivance state, even if it serves no purpose, even if it's just kind of the whole purpose that it is serving, right, is not exactly sound, because it's just what you're doing is, again, you're trying to perpetuate a false absolute contrivance state that, again, defers to a mass collective of people. But that doesn't have to have anything to do with you, right? At no point do you have to vouch for that. But no, it's like the minimalist takedown would be that, you're in a position to, you try to do that, fend for yourself. So you don't want the benefits of society, but you don't want it to inhibit you either. So, like, even as you try to escape it, it's going to try to stop you. Right, there's always this emperor has no clothes fallacy, like, oh, you just don't get it, or that's somehow your fault, or that somehow you are just, you have the inability to practice this absolute contrivance state, but yet maybe it's not absolute, so it couldn't be a choice. Like, the reason why you would prefer that or be a minimalist in the first place couldn't be because you decide that, like you couldn't possibly choose that. Oh, it's just because you're not good enough at being part of this contrivance state, assuming that that's an absolute, that you would not want to be a part of it. So, again, there's a situation where you... Okay, let me try to remember that phrasing. I keep forgetting it. Again, you need society's permission even to not be a part of society. So, there could always be this fallacy, like, oh, well, if you don't like this, then you just don't have to be a part of it, right? There's this false duality that takes place, right? So, okay, if you want to be a minimalist, then right, then why don't you just go do that? Okay, so a person goes and tries to do that. They go out in the woods, they try to hunt, fish, fend for themselves. But, oh no, you need a hunting permit, fishing permit, license. You can't do it these hours. You have these restrictions, this restriction. And so you're not even trying to be a part of society. You're just leaving it and saying, okay, I'm going to fend for myself, mind my own business. But they'll still try to restrict you and inhibit you, right? Oh, you're on government land, you're on corporate land, you're on, private property. Right, there's so many restrictions, even when you don't want anything from it. Okay, I'll fend for myself, but even the land, even the nature, even the entire, all natural resources, all of that is owned and monopolized by government, corporations, other people. So this notion that, you want to be a minimalist, just go and do it, but you're not even allowed to do it. Even that has to be within the permission. You see how that works? Like, that has to be within the permission of society. First you would have to buy your own land and then have like a minimalist commune and then, do it from there instead of, right, instead of being able to do it inherently. So that is always a contradiction, right? If we were at a debate and I was presenting myself as a minimalist, or not even really arguing for it, but just presenting the idea of it, people can say that, oh, well, why don't you just go out and be a minimalist if you want to? Well, let's think about the obstacles that society would pose to you trying to even do that, right? And it would inhibit every element, every layer, right? Oh, you're committing a crime by trying to hunt and fish off of nature, because that's somehow you're poaching or you're stealing or you're doing something, right, in the pretense of some law. But in reality, it's just a way for, again, big corporations can monopolize that. So, oh, you have to buy it from them. You can't do it yourself. You can't be free. So basically what it shows you is that people are even dumber than you think they are, and so have no credibility collectively, because what happens is you go for all these pretenses that, oh, it's to protect something, right? It's just so that big corporations can ravage it for themselves. Like, okay, to what I call, again, you take a monopoly over means. So it's not so much corporate monopoly, the way that sometimes people misunderstand. Whenever you say monopoly, that's what they think you mean, but it's not even about that. It's about the societal monopoly over everything, like nature, land. So it doesn't even have to be like who is monopolizing it. It's just like, you, in other words, you can't do anything without its permission, right? You need permission to even be free of it, to even live out in the woods, right? Like think about this hypothetical person, right? You don't want the benefits of society. You just leave. You have no possessions, nothing. You just walk out into the woods. You walk out naked, right? And this is always a dramatic example in one of my short stories that's pretty funny. You walk out into the woods, right? And what's the first thing that happens, right? Oh, you get arrested for one of two things. I think I just said this like yesterday, didn't I? I always refer to the story. It's like you walk out with nothing on his back. So now, what does society do then? Oh, we arrest him. So now I don't know if it crashed or if I'm just getting an ad break in my own stream. So I have to wait right when I'm in the middle of this good story. Having to watch ads on my own stream is kind of ridiculous, but I guess because I'm either not logged in, or I guess it sort of simulates what the viewer experience would be like. I don't run ads ever, but they force you to somewhat. So no, the point is that, oh my God. So what you do is you decide to basically you do it in a minimalistic way that allows you to, again, you go out into the woods as a minimalist. You don't need the benefits of society. You don't want anything, right? But you just don't want to be inhibited by it either. So that seems like the trade-off, right? You're just neutral, the inherent man, as I talk about. And so what that means is you're able to basically do it in such a way that, oh no, but that discredits you because you're taking some benefit of society with the clothes on your back. Okay, that it made, and that you bought and whatever. So okay, you take that off, but now you get arrested for public indecency or exposure on your way out of society because, they prevent you from being naked. So they force you to wear clothes, but then they arrest you, but then they discredit you for wearing them if you try to be a minimalist. So you're only doing it for their benefit, but then you're defined by it, and that's somehow you relying on society or vouching for it, which is an analogy for society overall. It's like, you rely on it and you need it. Is it that, or is it that, again, you're born into it, you're indoctrinated into it, you didn't choose that, and then even if you try to free yourself of it, again, they try to stop you, or it's more like, you rely on society. It's more that it relies on you, the individual, because, how could you rely on it when it inhibits everything that you do, right? Let people be free, and they did just fine without society before too. Like, you could hunt, you could fish, you could live off the land, you could pick berries. Like, it's not like people couldn't survive, right? You could argue a certain convenience or quality of life, but that's a moot point with this, because this notion that, you need society, you rely on society. In what way, right? You only rely on it for the overcompensations and conveniences that are a trade-off for it inhibiting you in every area of life anyway. So what that means is, again, society inhibits every single thing that you can do, and you need its permission to do it. And then somehow society will come back and say, see how you rely on it, see how you have to abide by it because you're forced to do it. So it forces you to abide by it, and then that somehow validates it. See how you rely on it? No, it's not that you rely on it, it's that you defer to it, right? You tolerate it. Right, but you could easily say, okay, you could do without it, and it's even an obstacle, and it's even inhibiting everything that you do, right? So you should hold that accountable instead of acting like, oh, somehow that's your fault, like, yeah, then this character goes out in the woods, right? And then they try to fend for themselves. Okay, they're going to hunt, they're going to fish, but, oh, wait a minute, that's government land, you can't do that, you'll get arrested. Or, oh, that's poaching, you're breaking a law, you need a hunting license, fishing license, permit, right? And then it's like you might say, oh, just leave society, but everywhere you go is going to be part of some society with some laws, with some overextension, with this and that. So that's the one thing that's always against the law in every country, in every era of human history, right? You can't be free. You can't be truly free from it. Even if you don't want anything from it, you're always part of it, whether you choose to be or not. So, right, freedom is the greatest sin. Like, what harm is this one random person who's just fending for themselves really doing? And the answer is, right, they're really not harming anybody or anything. You could argue, well, if enough people do that, then we might invalidate society overall. We'll show that we don't need it. But that's the real threat, I guess. But again, they try to hunt, they try to fish, they try to live off the land themselves. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to say, oh, now they need a permit, they need a license, they need permission, they have to do it this way, they have to follow certain rules, and they also have to, again, now they're on government land, or they're on corporate land, or they're on private, property. So, oh no, they're, right, you don't have permission, you're trespassing. Even if it's nature, even nature is owned by somebody, right? Government, corporation, individual, and so it allows you to realize that, oh my God. It allows you to right, you just recognize, again, everything is owned by somebody, so now you're out in nature, you're out in the wild. How much more separated from society can you be? But, oh no, you still need permission within, again, permits and licenses and this and that. And, private property and this and that. So think about what you are convinced to do, right? You're convinced to basically give up your inherent freedoms for this illusion of possession in a finite zero-sum existence where the expression is always like, oh, you can't take it with you. But more than that, it's like, it's a situation where you feel like, again, it's for this illusion of like, okay, you carve out this little spot for yourself, other people have their own little thing, so for your own little prison within society, that you can make that prison as nice as you want, you can decorate it, freely, your house, whatever, So you have this nice little overcompensated prison. So you give up everything for that, right? Basically to be restrained, to be controlled, to be kept in one place, to be, trained like an animal. This is what you give everything up for. And so now you understand what that process is really about, because you need permission even to not be a part of it, even to escape it, right? You need permission for that. So, well, that's always a stupid argument when people say, oh, if you want to be a minimalist or something, just do it. I mean, you theoretically could still try to do it, but, it would be very, very difficult to not use anything from society, not because, oh, you need it or you rely on it, but because, you are forced to, because, again, everything is, there's so many layers to this fallacy, right? You go out in nature, and then, again, everything is owned by somebody, so it's monopolization of means. But even beyond that, it'd be like, okay, even what is left, like let's say, the environment is all ravaged and all the really ripe and great resources are taken, right? They're all already consumed by big corporations too, so there's nothing left. Or the places that you'd be free to go would be the ones with the worst resources left, or the most dangerous environments. It's like, oh, you're going to get killed by some wild animals, which again, that could happen normally without society at all. But the difference is, what happens now is it sort of congregates everything. Like, you're outside of society, so now it could be more dangerous there, because what society does is it pushes everything out into one area. So, obviously in cities and so forth, there's going to be very little wildlife, right? Dangerous wildlife and stuff like that. Whereas in the wild, right? So it creates like an unnatural thing, right? Normally, let's say there was no society at all, it's going to be more spread out. Yeah, there's no doubt there's going to be dangerous wildlife, but it'll be more like, all over the place. Whereas now it'll all be congregated in the areas that society and people don't occupy. So now it makes it seem like, oh, look how dangerous it is. But yet that danger is partly artificial, because the same areas that you'd be free to go to, right, that wouldn't be part of society or like actively populated, would be the same ones that would be most dangerous potentially, because society drives everything out into those areas, right? All the wildlife, dangerous animals, things like that. So, yeah, this audio quality is sometimes hard to judge, right? I think it's sometimes a trap of me trying to trying to talk louder because it's like me trying to talk louder because I decide to because of the sound of the car, but it ends up not really helping. So, oh my god. But yeah, it's those issues of right, the self-contradiction of society that, oh, if you don't like it, just don't be a part of it. Also, if you try not to be a part of it, we'll restrict and inhibit you every step of the way. And so we're practically forcing you to, not practically, like you are forced to do it if you don't abide by it. So, right, it's this is where like entitlement honestly is justified. You say, oh, look how entitled you are. Right, but it would be more like a concession that like, well, you are owed something, because it's like, oh, society can inhibit every area of your life and you need its permission for every little thing, and it comes from, oh, a place of benevolence, or oh, it's for your own good and this and that. But it's like the real issue is the fact that how can society inhibit everything that you do and everything in life, but then, oh, you don't get anything back for it? Like, oh, you're entitled. No, you would hold accountable. Like, no, we are owed something. We deserve something, whether it be convenience of technology or whatever, right? You would be deserving of that or expecting something, because Otherwise, what are we inhibiting all this for, right? What is it for? So you act like, oh, it's entitled or privileged or whatever, but in reality, that's a concession for the contrivance state in the first place. The fact that, okay, we inhibit and defer every area of our lives. We need permission. We need, structure, whatever. And we're inhibited in every single way all the time, right? So in exchange for that, you at least better have some good restitution, some good, again, like sort of payback or convenience or almost reward for it, right? So again, it's not really entitlement, it's more just something that you're getting back for all the inhibition and sacrifice from your inherent state that you would have, right? And so this is an active accountability that should be present that isn't, that we sort of just take it for granted as false absolute, especially when we're indoctrinated in youth before we can critically think. So again, society in that way is predatory, the same way that a regime or like a tyrant would be, like World War II Germany. Everyone uses the example, like, or whatever, everyone knows this example, like, oh, the H youth, I won't even say what the thing is, but like, okay, you get them while they're young because then they can't critically think, and then they're old, well, by the time they're old enough, they're already indoctrinated and they associate it with their identity, so it's easier to control them that way. That is the same way that, again, society operates. Now you might argue, well, it's not as bad as that in the particulars, but that's kind of falling for the trap. It doesn't matter about the particulars because you have, right, it's an unsound process, so it doesn't matter. Like, let's indoctrinate people when they're young so that, they can't question it or critically think, so that somehow validates us and makes us right, even though you could do that with basically anything. And let's use, again, unqualified empirical authority. Let's sort of use the monopoly over means that we have, because they rely on us for food and this when they're young, and we restrict and inhibit everything that they can do, right? We make them weak so we can control them and then say that they need us, right? That's even for adults, right? We try to make you weak and lazy by relying on the convenience of society to say that, oh, this is why you need society in the first place. But the only reason why you need those things or want those things is because of the inhibition in the first place. So it's like, it's what you're left with to react to, but that somehow validates it. Like, what, this is an expression that I use too, is whatever would you do, right, without the benefits of society, but just imagine what I could do without its inhibitions, without its restrictions. You could basically do anything. You could do whatever you want. So you'd be free. The world is your oyster, right? So you're sacrificing and inhibiting and giving up so much for it that, right, it's a trade-off. So it's taken as a false inherent that, that just goes without saying. No, there should be accountability that, like, if you're giving up so much, you would only be natural to expect something in return this way. So these last couple times I've been trying to hold it up to my mouth, basically, in such a way that might be better than like hold it closer to your mouth but talk quieter instead of holding it further away and sort of almost yelling. Right. That kind of seems to work a little better. But yeah, you have a lot of these preconceived notions, and again, the best way to control people is to basically again, sort of divide and conquer. So your enemy is the random individual, right? Your enemy should be some random person like me or whatever, who might be objective observer, neutral, right? Maybe makes you question something. They're the one who you should question. not the unqualified empirical authority ruling by omission, out of sight, out of mind, right? The whole authority structure, right, that controls everything. Don't focus on that. Somehow you get people to focus on the individual, right, in front of them. This is the initial mindedness problem that I talk about. They'll focus on you, the individual, whatever your position might be, but not the larger process, right, that you'd say, right, so it's sort of like you pass down the blame and accountability, right, you'll get mad at the cashier in a grocery store, but not the bosses, the owners, the, kind of corporate heads, out of sight, out of mind, right, who really create the process. You pass it down and they use them as a scapegoat or a whatever. So if you were aware and accountable of them all the time, the owners and stuff, then you would question it. Or it's kind of like it's kind of like, how can I describe it? Basically, you I don't know, you react to what's put in front of you, so you have this almost like tokenism incentive, and it's a situation where again, you either blame or attack or like you hyperfixate on every little thing, right? Like, oh, this person's in front of you physically, so therefore you can perceive them with your five senses, you see, and therefore you're going to focus and pick on every little thing that they do. Okay, interesting. But you won't do that with someone who's out of sight and out of mind. So that makes the person, again, like the owner, executive, whatever. So that makes that person perfect and better because you're imagining something better than reality, or you're giving the benefit of the doubt. But because the person in front of you is there, you're going to hyperfixate and criticize everything they do. And so the problem with that is, well, what if we reverse the roles? Let's put the executive there in front of you and put the other person out of sight, out of mind. Now you give them benefit of the doubt. So you're basically punishing, again, just the initial basis and ignoring the larger process at work. So if that person was in front of you, you would hyperfixate and criticize everything they do too. So you're kind of misframing the thing. But again, you're kind of a mindless sheep in that situation, that you just focus on what's in front of you. So we can control your whole perception and reality just by controlling what you're exposed to, which is a lot of what society does and media does. It's ironic because, like in the U.S., you would say, oh, well, it's not like China where your media is still more free, but still, right, the process is the same. It's just like, it's a little secondhand, like, if it's something that would really change or have an impact, then it'll be censored. So you have the illusion of freedom until it's something that really matters and really has an impact and really counts. And so sometimes I wonder, I don't know, what would have happened if I kept doing that back then, this same format. I probably would have gotten in trouble for it, honestly. So like maybe when I'm doing it now, I'm sort of toning it down, but again, what reason would you have to get in trouble? It wouldn't be because you're actually doing anything wrong, but because, again, you break down some preconceptions and illusions that people have, and then that can cause turmoil, but that assumes that those things were validated in the first place. And so it's very odd, but I'll bring it back. I mean, that's what I've been doing here, so I don't know why I like doing it so much while driving, because it feels like, like when I'm actually by my computer, it feels like, oh, well, I may as well, even though I haven't been, I've been mobile streaming anyway there, but like, it feels like when you're there, you may as well use your computer then. Well, but then, and when you're on your computer, you may as well do something more intensive than just simply talking into the mic, like playing chess, of course, that's really intensive, but But it feels like here, like there's nothing else I could do if I was going to stream aside from something like this where I can just talk. So it seems to fit really well, right? So I'm not going out of my way to do it here, and I'm not sacrificing doing anything else that I could be doing, right, in a better setup. So it does seem to make a certain amount of sense. So this one didn't seem to crash, although sometimes when I say that it'll crash right away. But so the Starlink is kind of hit or miss. There's sometimes where it's really fucked up and I don't know why. Right, there's been a few times where it crashes. So I do it on 720p on here, and again, it doesn't really matter, but it should be able to handle that. Like, I'm not showing anything on screen anyway. Or like I just upload. Some of these videos might go viral for the wrong reason. Like I never even, it's certainly not my intention, but like I'm streaming in 144p or some shit and you can't even see what's on the screen. And I'm doing those blind rankings. So it's like, I make the joke like, that's why it's a blind ranking, because you can't see. Because like I was streaming in such shitty low quality, or maybe it was defaulting to that because it was so, my internet was having issues. It's like, because I'm trying to stream on mobile data or test all kind of different things. So so yeah, that was a good discussion. These are kind of not quite as organized as my typical, like when I was actually trying to do the episodes of Absolutist Philosophy, but these are more just kind of random. But I was trying to upload these type of sessions on a more regular basis though, instead of because I'm always on like a 2-week delay where it just takes me that long to get around to uploading what I'm currently doing. And I love the backlog of stuff that I have. Like, again, from 2021 and on, there's so many things I haven't uploaded. But that's why I'm trying to keep up at least with the current things of what I do, which would be really hard to do if I did, like, really long streams every day, but I guess I don't really have time to do that anyway, or I could do it, like, a couple times a week, but like, some of those longer sessions I've done lately have been the NBA 2K stuff, which is a little bit tricky with the file size too, right? Because those tend to be a little bigger than anything else I do. But yeah, these are kind of good sessions to do sometimes. Right, while driving, it's almost like when I don't have time, if I don't have time to do anything else.